Welcome to the Bettendorf Public Library's Take-Home Workshop. Today we're going to be making these pretty little trinket trays. We're making them out of an air-dry clay, so it's not something that you have to worry about having an oven to set or anything like that. In your kit, first you're going to find your clay. Like I said, this is an air-dry clay. It's very light, it's very soft. It kind of has a look and feel of marshmallow fluff, but it doesn't stick to your hands that badly. You have about an ounce there. You're going to have a bowl. We'll use that for a mold for our tray. You have a template that we'll use to cut the correct size. You have a little bit of paint, a craft stick, a mold that we're going to use for the stamping, and we printed these on our 3D printer. You can use any sort of a rubber stamp or any sort of stamp. If you have a design or something else that you like better, you can certainly use that. And you'll find a little bit of plastic wrap. What we're asking you to provide is a pair of scissors or a way of, you'll want to cut your plastic wrap in half, a way of doing that. And then a way to roll out your clay. Now, caution, this clay, air dry clay, is not food safe. And so if you don't want to use like a rolling pin that you would use for cookies or something like that, I'm going to use this glass, and it's a glass, so we're not going to have clay sticking to it or embedding itself in it. I can run this through the dishwasher on a sanitizing setting, and it'll come clean again. But I would not use plastic. I would not use wood. If it's something that you're using it for food, I would not use it for tray. If you have some pipe at home, like piece of PVC or copper pipe or something like that would work great. Or alternatively, you don't have to roll it, you could just press it with your hands. So that's another option too. I'm going to take my plastic wrap and I'm laying it down on my work surface, not to protect my surface, but to protect my clay. Because my work surface is a mess, kind of. It's a cutting mat, it's got bits of dust and fiber and stuff on it, and if I roll my clay out on that, it will get all embedded in there. So I'm just going to roll it on my plastic wrap. I'm going to start just by squishing it down. Now, if you only have food implements for rolling out, the other thing you could do is you could sandwich your clay in between like 2 sheets of wax paper or 2 sheets of plastic wrap. If you don't have those things at your house, maybe you'll have like a plastic bag from the grocery store. You can use something like that. Anything to protect your implements from coming into contact with this non-food grade clay. So I'm rolling out my clay, and what I want is a disc that is big enough to fit my template on, which this certainly is. But I also want to make sure that it is the right thickness and that it is of uniform thickness. So what we're looking for is maybe a 1/4 inch. You don't want it too terribly thick. And obviously the thicker it is, the longer it will take to dry. Air dry clay does take a while. And you want it to be uniform. So there we go. Very nice. So now I'm going to peel this off of my plastic wrap, and I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut a little bit of the plastic wrap. I don't need a lot. And I could have done that before I started to put that back on there. And I'm going to set that aside because now we're going to prep our paint. So when we're stamping, and again, you don't have to use the stamp we provided. If you have other rubber stamps at home that you really like, you can use those. But we want just a very, very thin bit of paint on there. You also don't have to use paint for this sort of project. If you have stamp pads at home, those work too. So I'm just going to pour a little bit out. I'm going to sandwich it between 2 layers of my plastic wrap, and then I'm just going to spread it out. And I had a hole in my plastic wrap. Okay. And then when I open it up again, I have a nice thin layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my stamp. I'm going to stamp it on my paint and then off a little bit to one side. Okay. And then I'm going to start with a stamp right in the middle. Perfect. Then I'm going to build a pattern out from that, and I'm just going to do kind of a checkered board pattern like I did here. A couple things to look out for when you're doing this, and your pattern is entirely up to you. So you can do like a symmetrical pattern like this. You can do a random pattern if you like. It's entirely up to you. You do want to try to, you'll get paint and stuff on your fingers. You want to keep the edges clean as much as possible. There is some cleanup that can be done, but the cleaner you keep it, obviously, the less there is. So I'm pushing enough to get good contact, but I'm not looking to make huge indentations in my clay. Once I have a big enough design that it will go under my template, and I think I might add a couple more there and there, then I'm going to let this sit for 10-15 minutes or so. I just want the paint to dry a little bit so that when I put my template on there, it doesn't smudge it. So we'll just let that dry for a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll cut our design. It's been about 15 minutes. My paint has dried, not all the way, but a little bit. And this air dry clay does take a considerable amount of time to dry. So 15 minutes left by itself is not going to make the clay dry, but will give the paint a chance to dry a little bit. Now, you see this little goober right here? When I closed my paint, when I snapped it shut, a little bit of paint shot out and landed on my thing, on my tray. Which did not make me happy, but it's not the end of the world. What I'm doing is I'm taking a cotton swab with just a little bit of water, and I'm just going to very gently go in and do that, a little bit of cleanup there. And that's kind of nice because it does take a little bit of practice to be able to stamp that design without making a mess. And adding a little bit of water doesn't hurt it. Now, do I want to, set it awash? No. But you can make it better. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use my template to determine where I'm cutting. And I'm just going to cut with a craft stick. If you have a sharp blade, an X-Acto knife or something like that, that will probably work pretty well as well. It would probably work better, but unfortunately I couldn't send X-Acto knives home for all of you. So I'm just going to center up my design. And I'm not going to do a draggy. I'm not going to drag my craft stick around, because if you drag it, then when it gets to the point where there's paint, it drags that design too. So at least for the initial pass, I'm just pressing down all the way around. And I'm pulling out just a little bit. And I don't want to press too hard on my template. Once you lay it down, it's going to stick pretty well. Okay, so I have that done. Now I'm just going to go in and I'm going to kind of do little rubs so you can kind of see. Basically I made a perforated line by doing those little pressings, and now I'm going in and I'm just clearing out the perforations. This is not hard, but it does take a little bit of time, and you want to take your time about it, because what you're doing as you're connecting these perforations and getting it fully cut is you're also giving yourself a smoother edge. Once you've made it all the way around, then you peel off that outer ring. And I'm just going to go around with my fingers and just kind of make sure everything is smooth. Now, I'm going to very gently, I'm going to start at a place where there isn't paint so that I can kind of stick my finger on there without smudging paint. From this point on, if possible, you only want to touch it in places where it didn't have paint. Okay, once we're happy with that, now we're going to mold it. So we're going to take our bowl, we're going to lift up plastic and all, and we're going to set it on our bowl. Now, you want to try and get it as evenly centered as possible. And we're going to push down very gently, again in the spots without paint. I'm trying really hard to not let my fingernails hit the clay because they'll leave little dents. So we're going to do that, and we want to press it down in there as evenly as possible. And it might take you a few tries to get it in there so that you don't have a lopsided bowl, so that you don't have one side that is higher than the other. Now I'm going to set that aside for 24 hours. So for those of us who are like our crafts instant gratification, this might not be the one for us, although the end result is so cool that I was willing to wait. So 24 hours. At the end of 24 hours, I pull out the plastic wrap and I peel it off the bottom. It's fairly rigid at that point in time. But once you peel the plastic wrap off, you'll notice that the bottom is not dry. So then I take like a couple pencils or something like that, and I just set it upside down. I want air to be able to get all the way around it. And I let it sit for another 24 hours. And then you're done. And you have your little trinket bowl that can be used for your rings at night. You could make a set of them for staples and paper clips and things on your desk. You can do different colors. You don't have to use a stamp. You could do freehand painting, whatever you'd like. And we want to see what you do. So if you would share it with us, please, on social media. And we'd like to thank the Bettendorf Public Library Foundation for sponsoring this take-home workshop.